My name's Ruth. I'm from One-to-One Doula. I specialise in breastfeeding. I'm a doula who specialises in breastfeeding. Been working with mothers in breastfeeding since 2007. This is my thing, this is what I enjoy, this is what I love to do.
I'm Ali, I'm a doula. I'm from Essex, so we travelled in together, and I brought Hannah, my daughter.
Yeah, I'm Zarina. I'm a mother of 4. I'm a breastfeeding support.
I'm Sandra. I'm a mother of 3. I have doula, but it wasn't used that 20 odd years ago, so I've given lots of support. I'm also a health visitor.
Hello, I'm Robin. I'm a newly mentored doula and a breastfeeding peer supporter in Lambeth, and I do baby massage and baby wearing photography as well.
I'm Zachi. I'm also a newly mentored doula. I've worked in food, with people in food for the past 8 years, so my interest, that's also like part of the reason why I'm a doula. And I support women as well through miscarriage and abortion, because I had a miscarriage, and I think that also, yeah, that's the angle between food and miscarriage and abortion, where I support women in terms of their reproductive journey. So yeah.
Hi, I'm Antoinette. I have 3 children. I am a doula, hypnobirthing teacher, and a massage therapist.
I'm Stephanie. I have 1 child. He's here, Anthony. I'm also a doula.
Hi, I'm Lina. I'm a doula. I used to be a midwife in Asia for 18 years, but now I'm here in South London.
Hi everyone, I'm Benaifa. I'm here on behalf of La Nature League. I'm a trustee with them. We're beyond excited that you set this up for us all to start joining in and talking very much. Oh, I have 2 sons.
So I'm Ria Lawrence. I'm a South East London based doula, placenta specialist and trainee breastfeeding counsellor. And I've written this poem called At the Breast. At the breast we learn how love feels, how it stirs. Warm, soft and silent, our throbbing scent of hers. The yearning in that eternal sacred space, the aching need is sated. By the holiest connection, this blessed union, so underrated. It's much more than simply nutrition. It goes far beyond food. An education in mutual adoration, calming, soothing, lightening the mood. This one always gets me, sorry. At the breast, our sons are shown how to be cherished. Our daughters discover the depth of their worth. Future longing and self-doubt perish. Compassionate hearts and forgiveness are birthed. A tailor-made tonic, fats, minerals and enzymes. The milk that flows between a baby mama dyad has benefits that stretch way out in time. Reductions in asthma, allergies and obesity, all while giving antibodies and healthy gut seamlessly. This liquid gold boosts a growing immunity. At the breast we raise helpful, well-adapted members of our community. So who is forcing this natural, wondrous event to be hidden? Why is the sight of 1/2 of the population's areolas forbidden? This kind of stigma means feeding our babies ain't for the faint-hearted. So if for any reason you had to stop before you really got started, I salute you for trying. Because yes, breast is best, but the worst rates in the world, that's a real test. To change this, we need support, knowledge and a genuine desire. Let's work together so those crooks at Aptamil can't find a buyer. Thank you.
It's really important to bring Black Breastfeeding Week over to the UK because the same disparities within maternal health and infant mortality, is very similar to what we have over here in the UK, and we all, like, if we look at the evidence, it shows us that babies are dying at a higher rate, and in the black community, this could be to do with the preterm birth or baby sizes, because they tend to be, black babies tend to be born a lot smaller, and in regards to this, breastfeeding can reduce infant mortality by 50%. So it's important that the black community do learn about the benefits of breastfeeding, not just the benefits, but also know that there's support out there and how to get the support, and to avoid these issues and to reduce these numbers. And I did want to also highlight that, yes, over here, if anyone does look, it does show, the statistics show that actually breastfeeding rates are higher in the black community over here, but we believe, and I believe, this is the initiation, because within the community, what I have seen, and I've been working in breastfeeding since 2007, and within the breastfeeding community, what I have seen, I've seen the big numbers of drop-offs within the black community. I've also seen how much black women frown about going outside of their house and breastfeeding, and even if you look around you, you'll notice that you don't notice black women breastfeeding in public. And if they're not breastfeeding in public, what are they doing? Because their babies do need to eat. They're not staying in their houses, and I guess we all know this. So we're just going to go and explore this on a deeper level. We have a lot of, a few talkers. We've got 5 speakers here who can talk to you about this, and about their experiences. Maybe it's to do with the work that they do, or just as a mother, or what they've seen around them in the community. Okay, so I'm going to hand you over to Tasha.
Hi everyone. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Natasha, or known as Tasha Smith. And I'm here as a doula, as a mother, supporting Ruth, supporting the week, for the same reasons. I am probably one of those mothers that have experienced the initiation and the challenges about continuing. When I had my first son, I set up a support group, and it's still running now, and a lot of the mothers that I've spoken to had that same experience with the challenges, but also we did a short questionnaire prior to the event, and some of the feedback that I've had is what we've just discussed, that the initiation is there, they understand the value of breastfeeding, they want to breastfeed, but the realising the challenges perhaps that come with it, the changes that and the adaptations that need to be made were some of the things that were coming up. And one of the most biggest things that I found surprising was that most of the women said that they just didn't know that there were support groups, that there was actually any such thing as a mother supporter or a counsellor, and so when they did find that, it would usually be right at the end when they stopped breastfeeding. So I think it's really important that we're having a conversation today, but also considering safe spaces for women of colour to be able to speak. So I'm going to share with you my experience as a mother, and I'm going to be reading from here. So, Black Breastfeeding Week is here, and I'm glad that there is time and space dedicated to naming the topic of what I consider an integral part of maternal and infant well-being. My background, I used to be a teacher in the early years, and when I became a mother, I started supporting women with their health and recovery, and just motherhood and the things that come with it, because I had a traumatizing birth for my first birth, pretty much nearly died, and obviously that had an effect on breastfeeding. And it was, I think, my mum was my support during that time, and I think for her, from seeing her reaction, we realised that there is a massive shift in birth and the life that follows after birth. It was like 2 worlds. She was from one world and I was from another world. And I couldn't understand what was different from me to my mum, and why my experience wasn't like hers. But that comes with education. Many people say that black women have the highest initiation rates as a rebuttal for why such a week, prefaced with black, should exist in addition to the breastfeeding week, which takes place earlier in the year. There are many reasons why it's important for us to take time to discuss this specifically. My experience of breastfeeding is common to many women. My experience of birthing is also common to many women, but the way in which some of those come about are intimately connected to who I am. There is a silent legacy of harm when it comes to Black female reproduction and Black mothering. There is trauma, generational as well as post-traumatic. There are familial legacies of shame and discomfort when it comes to the infant mother dyad. There are prohibitions, inhibitions, attached to being Black while feeding, birthing, healing, rearing, nurturing, and nurturing. The things that come to us because of our shared culture, our shared identity, can be looked at or frowned upon. I remember being at school when I was little and hearing children, mocking fellow little Black girls whose hair was protectively groomed under thread. When Asian girls' hair glistened in the light and smelled from the aroma of coconut, I remember hearing them being teased. I would see the looks of others when an African woman would get on the bus with a baby wrapped around her, strapped to her back. And you could see the look, and you would hear those things as perceived as backwards. I remember when I was in school and little boys would also say that my plaits reminded them of worms or doo-doo. I remember tirelessly having to explain how cane rows, or cornrows if you're American, was stuck to my head. Why am I mentioning this? Some of you know I don't have to explain it to a lot of people in this room. And I'm not going to answer that question. It should be self-evident. If I have to explain it, then it certainly justifies why there is a need for this week. I remember when I wore my unmanipulated hair out for the first time walking along a road nearby my house in Kent. And by unmanipulated, that's, literally not stretched, not braided, nothing that would create any type of wave or curl. It was my dried hair, huge fro, and I heard for the first time, I'm not saying it's the first time I experienced racism, overt racism, nigger, in 2017. Further down the same road was a flag. It wasn't a Union Jack, and it wasn't the England flag. It was a Confederate flag, and this is in Kent, in England. Let's take some of those incidences, and let's say that this is a shared experience, and sparing myself time and you darker scenes of othering and inequality, place them in modern Britain. Something really simple and easy without going too far, too deep. This is just a personal experience I'm sharing today. It's just shared experiences and representation. We already recognize that when a woman sees another woman breastfeeding, it could be her mum, her aunt, her sister, she's likely going to attempt that herself. When a woman receives peer support, she is more likely to continue breastfeeding as well. So what about women who have maybe those experiences behind them and initiate breastfeeding and then come up against similar challenges? What about those women? If a woman who is perceived as other, so constantly having to explain those really simple things that I've tipped to you, and that's just from childhood into adulthood, because I'm sure most of us, we've had some, can I touch your hair? How did you get like that? All these really strange questions that make you feel odd or different, right? So you already know you're perceived as other, you're not normal. How would that experience of your body affect you breastfeeding in public? If you're fully clothed and you have issues about who you are, how would it feel when you have to reveal an intimate part of your body and breastfeed in that same environment? What might it mean for a woman in hijab? I recognise that my opportunities are blessings as well as challenges. I've lived in Newham, I've lived in Kent, Essex and East Midlands, all very different places. And one thing I can say is that your breastfeeding experience will be very different depending on where you are. When a black woman returns to work, the same person who may have experienced being labelled with these microaggressions, you know, aggressive, angry or difficult because she may have been frustrated in the past with an impossible workload. You know, many women of colour who maybe work for the local authorities, they are in highly stressful jobs already. Head teachers, attendance managers and other roles that are quite loaded. I think about those women. Or a woman who has been overqualified and never made a promotion. So she has those, you know, justified emotions and experiences. And she has a baby and she wants to continue to feed that baby. What is she supposed to do? How does she approach a manager with her past track record of difficult, being labelled difficult? How does she then go to approach a manager about being able to continue to feed her baby in the workplace? Will she risk this label again, or will she opt for ease and end the relationship because of fear of a loss of her income, because of the things she wants to be accommodated for? My experience is I didn't even bother. Go back to work so I could breastfeed my son. What about breastfeeding at home and adapting to change? Well, breastfeeding my first son was challenging because I had a traumatizing birth. The midwife was desperate to leave her shift and basically told me to give him a bottle. It was because I was staying with my mum, and in her very Caribbean way, she just told me, just keep putting him on the breast. I did what she said, despite thinking I wouldn't have any milk, that something was wrong with me because something was wrong with my birth. And speaking to a friend, and she said to me, you know, put a warm flannel on your breast and massage it, and it will help the milk to move down. And I remember my nan calling me and just saying to me, Tasha, are you breastfeeding? And I said, I'm trying, but it's not working. And she said the same thing. So I just continued to work with the advice that I had. I had to go back to hospital after being discharged from hospital. And I remember this experience with trying to put my son to nurse. And he made this hair-raising shrill. And I just felt so rejected. He'd been so used to the bottle that just when I put the nipple to him, he just screamed. And my husband saw it, and I could see the sympathy in his face because he could see that I was really hurt. And the doctor, the white male doctor, he just kind of left the room. And I just felt so helpless. But I just remember thinking to myself, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do this. And so, cut a long story short, I was able to establish a supply for my son, but I couldn't, with my first son, get over breastfeeding in public. I decided to give him a bottle for journeys and to nurse him indoors whenever I could. So if I was visiting my mum, I'd just stay indoors. If I was coming down to London, I encouraged myself daily by reading Kelly Mum at the time and a few baby forums that were online. Fast forward to my second son, I realised what I needed to avoid in birth and what I needed to do for breastfeeding. I still had quite a gap in knowledge and understanding, but I was able to breastfeed him for about a year. The challenge that I faced with my second son was about the lack of physical support from friends and relatives, as well as changing my expectations for myself and having realistic expectations from my children who were still babies. I still thought that I could just get all my chores done in a flash. I didn't realise how tiring it would be to have to look after a toddler and a newborn, all while house hunting, moving, and then having to make an unlivable house functional. The exhaustion took its toll on me, and I had terrible burnout. My heart would be racing at night. I'd have palpitations. I'd call the ambulance because I thought I was dying. I'd be tired and dehydrated, not realising how much more I actually needed to drink. And I remember speaking to other women actually and them saying the same thing, that they didn't realise how much more they needed to drink. And I'd feel like a zombie. I couldn't function during the day. It only occurred to me I hadn't been drinking enough, resting enough, getting enough sunlight to even support my body and for the baby to breastfeed. And it was, I only realised these really simple things after speaking to a male friend who was a natural health coach. My adrenals were messed up and my body was just confused with day, night. It just couldn't work out when was when. I'd be awake in the night, tired during the day. And a lot of that is about self-care and understanding how to adapt to motherhood and having realistic expectations and not keep going. You're not the same person you was before you had a baby. And I had insomnia and I blamed it all on breastfeeding. I thought breastfeeding was making me ill. That was my idea of it. So I was speaking to my friend Curtis, who was the health coach, and we were able to identify the changes that I needed to make. Bearing in mind, I still hadn't even had any type of external support about breastfeeding. I ended up weaning my son in order to help me recoup from the exhaustion. It wasn't long after that I stumbled across the Leche League. And I honestly can't remember why, but I think it was that I probably, by that time, was supporting mums. I started realising that, gosh, if I went through this and all of these experiences, this is the second time now, there must be other people going through it like me. And so we had the support groups that had been there for my first son. After that, I found Breastfeeding Network and then the ABM. And I was quite shocked to find that there was this world of breastfeeding support. And while maybe people might still perceive it as small, in my opinion, it was huge, because I was just like, it just exists, period, you know? And I thought to myself, why is this a secret? I literally felt it was a secret that had been kept from me. But I don't want to go on too long, so I'm going to round it up. But I just want to say that I ended up doing a lot of self-help to meet my breastfeeding goals. There were so many areas that I needed awareness of as it pertains to breastfeeding, and there was a lot of different things that would have motivated me and helped me to make changes maybe in a different way, rather than ending it earlier with my second son. It helped having my mum. With my first, I felt that if my mum had breastfed, then there was no reason, being her child, that I couldn't breastfeed. One day I asked her and I said, Mum, how long did you breastfeed me for? Just like a random curious question. And to my horror, she was like, oh, it's just a few weeks. And I had in my mind all this time thinking, oh, she breastfed me exclusively for, you know, a good year or something. And, you know, when she just threw it out there, I was like, Mum, that's not breastfeeding, you know? And it kind of made me laugh, because we're speaking to Ruth and we talk about initiation rates. Our concept, you know, maybe West Indian concept of breastfeeding as well, is that it's just any little bit constitutes. So you can put cornmeal in a bottle, you know, or arrowroot, or you know, you've all probably heard of something that we put in the bottle, rusk, and you fatten up the baby, you know, and stuff like that. So it just, yeah, it was quite funny to kind of hear that, but it makes me think about that number that we keep saying or throwing out, oh, that you have higher, you know, rates and all of these things, but actually, really realistically, what does breastfeeding look like in the Black community? I've just mentioned the rusk thing. And agree with Ruth when she said about the fall off. I was so determined. I really was so determined. I felt like I had been robbed of my birth experience, and even the antenatal experience has always been stressful for me. And I thought, they're not going to take away from me breastfeeding my children. I want to give them the best start in life, and I want to make sure that they're all boys, but they see breastfeeding as an important part of life themselves. As Ruth said, Black women have the highest maternal morbidity rates, and so do the infants. And I think it's really important for us to remember that they are also born earlier, most Black children, and it puts them at a greater risk for illness. and potentially death. So it's paramount that infants, especially the ones who are born prematurely or preterm, are given the mother's milk for optimal nutrition and for their immune benefits. Breastfeeding from the mother's breast is important as it helps them to bond also, and that's a really important part of the relationship, you know, and life, having a strong relationship with the mother. Breastfeeding, we know, has protective factors for the mother and the child, and it should be encouraged and it should be supported. And research shows that many women, they stop earlier, and we're talking about all women, they stop earlier than what they had hoped to. So we have to think about the guilt that comes along with that, and how that again affects that relationship, or affects the mother's overall well-being when she has to end that relationship, or she feels she has to end that relationship, especially in a group where there's already issues with mental health and depression and other areas of, you know, maternal health. We know that has a positive effect for diabetes and things like that. So we need to think about how we are supporting Black women, especially when we're looking at the overall health. I think it's extremely important. There's an economical impact that not breastfeeding will have on a woman, and these again will continue to add to that that life. I think that Black women know that it's imperative that Black women know that there are a range of services that can support them for breastfeeding, as well as adapting to new life, such as family support workers. It's important for her to be able to see in those that are supporting her someone who she can see herself in. I have my mum, you know, and that was important. She should at least have an option for this, I think. She should be able to sit with somebody who maybe shares some of those other experiences, you know, inhibitions about being out in public, potentially showing or revealing, you know, a little bit of skin, it might be, or it might be a lot of skin. Depends on the size of the woman, how she feeds the baby, position, how much she feel when she has to be out in public, you know, in Newcastle, in Manchester, in Lincolnshire, in Wales, places where there isn't a lot of diversity, potentially maybe even in an area that has a lot of tension. So how does she have support? What about when her mother or aunt tells her to add something to what the baby's having as a feed? She should be confident that she isn't betraying her culture or a sacred practice, but that she's given her baby the best start in life. She should be able to be confident that if she doesn't see milk the first day, that her body isn't defective as it's portrayed in the media, the society historically, but that she should seek to understand and persevere the way that she can attain her breastfeeding goals. So taking care of the mother, in my opinion, in pregnancy, in fact before pregnancy, with targeted preconception education is essential in reducing those figures. And we say, why Black Breastfeeding Week? And I say, why not?
Does anyone have any questions they'd like to ask? Natasha? Anyone? No? Okay.
Well, can I just say, your experiences with breastfeeding, it really ring true for what I found as well when I had my baby, especially the thing about introducing like breast in the bottle. Like even though my family had breastfed and they were used to it, they were still like at 3 months put something in the bottle and you have to and I've heard that from a lot of other Black women. So yeah, it was really interesting to hear. Thank you.
Oh. All right, thank you. So next,
Can I ask a question?
yes, you can ask. You can.
You're saying about you was feeling weak and dehydrated and all that. So is there a set amount of fluid that a woman should drink and take while she's breastfeeding?
I think you do have to think about increasing it, because I think what I did is I actually confused hunger with thirst. And even though I'm quite used to being quite, you know, good with those things outside of nursing and things like that, I just hadn't made that switch in my mind that some of the hunger I was experiencing was actually thirst. And already having had morning sickness throughout my whole pregnancy, with every pregnancy, never getting medical support for that, except for when I found doulas and people saying to me, oh, you should have actually had a lot of, you know, support for that thing. So I've gone into being dehydrated throughout pregnancy and then having issue with that, then going into nursing, and already with a body that's probably quite weak due to being quite dehydrated over a long period of time through the vomiting and so forth, and never really kind of been able to make that switch in my brain. Actually, let me just drink a bit more. I just continued as I was in pregnancy because I wasn't keeping down fluids anyway, but afterwards I just kind of needed to consciously remember that drink more.
And then did it help?
Yeah, so by the third baby I realised, okay, you're not hungry anymore, just drink.
So next up we have Zachi, who's going to come and embrace us with her talk. So is everyone still wanting more? Yeah? Good, you're going to get more. So here we go.
Hello. Sorry, I hate public speaking, but I think this is such an important not topic, because it's part of life. It's not just like talking about, I don't know, should we have like a new highway or something like it's actually affects all of us sitting in this room. And although I don't have kids, like looking at my mum and my cousin and my sister, I'm sure like they relate to all of your stories, especially like from school, your experience as well. And just thinking of my mum, my sister was 3 months premature and she never breastfed. Then me, she stopped breastfeeding me early because I ate too much, and she lost so much weight, like you were saying. And I remember all these breastfeeding stories of my family, and the thing that comes up most is I can't or I couldn't. Mm-hmm. It always comes up, oh, I couldn't, so I stopped, or I can't. And I was thinking actually, I still will speak about like the immunity benefits and also the microbiological benefits for the baby, but something that I hope we all take away from today, and thank you very much for like putting this on today.
That's good.
Is that,
did you explain who you are?
Oh no, I will.
Yes, sorry. All right, sorry.
Is that we are all enough, and the women that you support as well, it's important for them to know that they are enough and that they can, and it is a question of support, from food, from emotional support, from well-being, from someone telling you, okay, sleep, I will do the chores, or for having a doula or a mother or a sister, but we can and we are enough. And yeah, just wanted to say that. Oh, that was not part of my speech, but I realised that like on my way here, I was like, actually no, this like affects me even if I don't have children yet. But I'm Zachi. I'm from Croydon. I'm a newly mentored doula, and I'm a gastronome as well. So that means I've studied, and it's the field that I've worked in. So I study food from a scientific but also cultural perspective. And I think from the economical side of things, social, cultural, historical, production side of things, I've studied that, and I think the choices we make about food and the choices we make for our children, starting from breastfeeding, especially as black women, that's the crux of everything. It's where we start. And so yeah, so now properly going into my talk, apart from more scientific side, the less emotional side. And so breastfeeding and breast milk actually is the most perfect food on the planet. There's no other food that you can eat exclusively through any period of your life and survive and thrive. And it's the perfect model of nutrition, and it's been like that for the past 100 million years. So I don't know why we would mess with it and with formula feeding anyway. And it's also the perfect food because it's the only food production system where someone can give and also thrive, and it gives exactly what the person needs, what that baby needs. And so messing with the system, I don't think we should at all. But going back to the very beginning, when we think about ourselves, we think about me and I, and we're actually us. So for depending on various things, so whether you've just eaten or where you're also living, the amount of cells, the ratio to cells to microbiological cells in our body is actually 100 to 1. So there's 100 more bacteria, viruses, all those like little beings inside and around us than we have human cells. And when we think about that and the importance of breastfeeding, then it's so important to breastfeed. So this all starts, our microbiological being starts from actually before birth, from our mothers, because we as women in our last trimester, the amount of certain bacteria, especially in the birth canal, increases, especially lactobacillus. It makes the birth canal more acidic, and which prevents other pathogens from being there, especially, which is what you want when a baby's coming out. And also, lactobacillus breaks down the lactose in breast milk. So the mother goes into, in her third trimester, she'll produce a lot more of it. And that breaking down of the lactose gives energy to the baby. So when we talk about breastfeeding, birth is connected. It's not, every birth is different, but I'm just laying down what happens in, what potentially and hopefully happens in the majority of birth. So we start with the mother, and this comes into also her nutrition, so making sure that she's eating well, making sure that she's hydrated as well, making sure that she's eating a lot of pro and prebiotic foods, because the other part of her that changes is also her digestive tract. So when the baby comes out, it will be in contact with the mother's sort of fecal matter as well, and that is full of bifidobacteria. And that's important as well, that the baby gets that in their gut, because that lays down their microbiome for the rest of their lives. So all of us that were came out of our mothers, vaginally, we've got her gut flora in us. We've got her also vaginal flora in us as well, and that's what links us, like breastfeeding and birth, links us not just genetically to our foremothers and the first woman of time, if you like, but also links us biologically to the very first cells that were on this planet, because we are more bacteria and more microbes than actually anything else. So that's the seeding, and now on to the feeding. So breast milk feeds and grows the baby, but it also is so important to feed and grow the microbial activity that now the baby has. So the composition of breast milk, you have vitamins and minerals, carbohydrates, fats, proteins, amino acids. This all helps the baby grow. We love chubby babies, especially in the black community. If your baby's not chubby, then that's usually why the rust comes in.
And that is, I was just going to say that. That's why sometimes as well they expect their babies to be big, so then they introduce them to other foods. Otherwise, grandma's saying, "What's happening? You're starving your baby." Wrong with you. But they're making our babies overweight. Exactly. Not realising.
Exactly. I like this interaction. But that's not the only thing. The other thing that breast milk contains is antigens, antibodies, anti-inflammatories. So you've got growth promoters for the baby and also for the microbes itself. So I mentioned before, for example, bifidobacterium. There's a sugar in breast milk that babies can't break down, and it's an oligosaccharide. And the only thing that can break that down is the bifidobacterium. The only reason that is in breast milk is not for the baby, but to feed this bacteria that the baby has. And what that bifidobacteria does, it's a prebiotic, and it helps the baby's gut flora grow so that colonizes the baby, and so it sets it up for health right through later in life. So those first 2-3 years of a baby's life, they're training their immune system and they're setting themselves up for lifelong health. And the bacteria and the microbiome and the gut flora that can be created in those 2 or 3 years, we all will have 60% of it up until we're around 60 or 70. That percentage of microbial diversity usually goes down once we sort of hit older age, just because we get sicker, we take more medication. I think that's part of life. But if you think of...
Do you think that we upset that balance as we age?
We do upset the balance, especially sort of with antibiotics or antibiotics in food or various illnesses, but we can always build it up. So if you've worked very hard, if you've breastfed, not exclusively, but continuously for like 2 to 3 years, you're setting your baby up not just to grow now, but you're setting them up for even when you're gone. And I think that is the role as well of a parent. You're setting your children up to have the best life that they can. And breastfeeding, I don't know, breastfeeding rates from, I think there's a study going on for non-communicable diseases and breastfeeding, and babies that have formula are more at risk for non-communicable disease. I hate that word, I'm so sorry. Non-communicable diseases and allergies than children that breastfeed. Because if you have a child that their immune system can't, I'm sorry, I'm going all over the place. That's why I had notes, but I'm sorry, I've got so much to say. It's just like covering out everything. So when you've got a child, when they're newborn, their immune system doesn't kick in. And their immune system doesn't kick in for a reason, because the mother's bacteria from skin to skin, from breastfeeding, it needs to be seeded in that child. And so it's a biological adaptation that until 3-4 weeks, they don't have any immunity. So the antibodies in breastfeeding as well, they lie in the throat, they lie in the lungs, they lie in the gut, they seed into the mucus in all of those places in the baby, and they give them immunity. And the baby's immunity doesn't kick in because the mother's microbiome and bacteria needs a chance to seed. And if you don't give a baby that chance, if you don't breastfeed them, then they're seeding germs and you're confusing their immune system, because then their immune system doesn't know what's friend or foe and starts attacking everything, which is why then later in life you have more risk of disease and also allergies, because to like protect itself, everything that comes into it, even if it's nutritional and good for it, it will start attacking. So when we talk about breastfeeding, and although especially becoming a doula, I love the more emotional and spiritual side of things, I also love food, and this is so connected to the gut and the brain health. They're doing more studies on that as well, and a healthier gut is linked to better mental health. A healthier gut is linked to fewer diseases. A healthier gut is a healthier immune system. A healthier gut and a more diverse gut and microbiome system. There are so many health benefits that you can't get from formula feeding. In formula milk, there isn't oligosaccharides. So what is feeding the bacteria in your child's gut if you're formula feeding? And what I was saying before of that we are more than enough, I think, especially as black women, there's an underlying message that we're not enough from so many, from society, from even our partners. I come from a family of women, but I'm not saying all men are bad. And we've got lovely men in my family, but even seeing my cousin breastfeed, and you were talking about shame before, and we're in our family, and her partner wants her to really cover up and is really not supporting her, and we're family. And it's sort of, he's entering into her breastfeeding, into the feeding of their child. And it's crazy when you think of it as in that sense of things as well, and which is why I think our bodies and what we're made to do naturally, we are more than enough. And we've always been more than enough, and we've told we're not. So on a biological level, which is the point of my talk, even though I've gone off on a tangent a bit, I hope that message has come through, that we produce everything that our babies need. We produce everything that their bacteria that they have need as well. And you can only do that from breastfeeding. You can't get that from formula feeding. And in terms of nutrition for the mother, before birth, before conception, especially when breastfeeding, like probiotics, prebiotics, a lot of water, and also food that is related to you, because we're talking on a cellular level, all of this, and even foods that reconnect you to your past, to your culture, to your history, like they all, I believe that they all make your cells vibrate. They all make everything you do. They all make not everything you do, but when someone puts you food with love, you can feel it. And so when you are looking after your baby, if you've got food with love as well, you are producing food with love. So you're feeding your baby with all the love that a mother can, from spiritually, emotionally, biologically, everything. So yeah, I just hope that you as mothers know, and the women you support know as well, that they are really more than enough. Really, really. So yeah, I didn't follow my speech, but there we go.
So does anyone have any questions for Sachi?
Hello.
You go ahead.
You go first, so the last 15 minutes, if I could bottle you and take you to every antenatal appointment we've ever done in the UK, I think it would be amazing. The way you just spoke about breast milk was so informed and passionate, and also it wasn't about, it didn't have to be about breastfeeding, it was actually about breast milk, which is something that people often feel more comfortable talking about, I think. Do you have, you said you didn't like public speaking, but I have to say, it doesn't look like it. Can you put that on a YouTube video and we can send that to in the UK?
It'll be online.
Okay.
It's online.
The whole, that little clip or the whole thing? I'm just not the rest of it's not good too.
We'll see.
But have you ever written an article direct to mums with all that sort of stuff? Because that would be so good to share.
We'll definitely sort something out.
Yeah. I mean, not to say that everything else hasn't been inspiring too, but just that little bit. I just know the way you worded things was just really exactly what you mums need to hear. So thank you.
It's true. It is. You are enough. That is so important as well, because, you know, to be honest, I'll say as black people, they tend to struggle in general things within life and walk with, like, you got the whole world on your shoulders. As much as we might seem like we're happy, you would never know when we are sad, because of we've not been shown to show feelings as much and to explore our feelings as much. And we've always been told that, oh, you're so hard, so you try to be hard and you try to be strong. And that's also, it's a protection shield as well. And it's also as well with mothers. It's like, you know, if I'm a mother, young mother or an older mother, you chose to be a mother and you're expected to just get on with it. And you don't want to feel shame. And also in regards to women, black women especially, reaching out to ask for support. So there are support facilities out there. And a lot of black women don't know about the support facilities. I'll get back on there. So a lot of us are unaware of the facilities, just like other women. But then also, what happens is that when we do know about the facilities, we also feel quite ashamed to go there, and we feel that if we go there, that means that we're failing and we need help. And growing up with all the stigma, sometimes as well, when you're growing up with it, just if you think about it, like if you know any black friends, or as a black person, or someone from another race other than what the ones of a white race, when you're in school, who normally would put up their hands and ask for help? So it's just like from that's something that they've taken up towards in their life in regards to asking for help. If it was something that they said, oh, maybe you should go and look in the mentor, they're thinking, oh, you know, what's the mentor? Why should I have this? And they feel shame about it. And
also, your family is your first port of call, but sometimes when the information is wrong from your family, you don't know, or like you're saying, it's shameful to even tell your family that you're going outside of your family to look for help.
Exactly.
There's also that energy as well, which is a bit...
Because they feel like, oh, well, you know, it's easy for your mum they'll say words like, oh, well, you know, why do you need help? You should just know what you're doing. You should just, it's a natural thing. I've heard, even, unfortunately, I've actually heard the midwife say this, like, I don't understand what's all the fuss about teaching breastfeeding. You should just put the baby on the breast. Why does people need to learn this? And that's terrible to know that actually you're supposed to be supporting these mums as well to initiate breastfeeding. And I've also seen the disparities within the NHS in regards to how they support a black mother in comparison to a white mother. and I've seen it in front. I've seen it, and I'm sure other people have seen it. I've had clients say to me, how come this is what they're visualizing in front of their eyes without me even setting the seed on it. But it just goes to show is that we've grown up to undervalue ourselves and think that we are not worthy of more. Don't get me wrong, it's not all of us that feels this way, but there's a lot of things, and even what's on the TV that displays us, that we are in a lower class, and it's only changing nowadays that you see that you've got a lot more black TV presenters or people that are in a better role, instead of being the thug, the drug dealer, the young mother that doesn't have a father, and you're starting to see a bit more of families together and good things going on. And then this is when I think you start to realise that actually how much it affects what you see. And then we go on in regards to the pictures.
Internalise it all as well.
Yeah, because if you see things like, come on, if you give a child a TV, no matter what they see, they're going to see someone always bashing someone on their head. They're going to think that's just the way life is, and that's just how we have to be. And if you see someone's always looking after somebody and being nice, kind and considerate, they're going to think that's just the way that we're supposed to be. And this goes with breastfeeding. If you don't see a mother breastfeeding that looks like you, because I'm telling you, if you look on the internet, you put in breastfeeding images, you could do it right now, whoever's online, and what the pictures that you're most likely to see is pictures of white women. And if you're going to see that, sometimes it's easy as a black woman to feel like, oh, this isn't for me. I don't see myself. This isn't for me. That's what they do. So they segregate themselves from it. So there's so much more to be done around this, and so much more to look into. There's so much more I've got to say, but I'm not going to say it all. So yeah, was you going to say something?
I just like to add fear. I think sometimes, like when I speak to some of like clients or women I've supported, there's a fear of when breastfeeding isn't going how you expect it to go. It's not you sometimes as a black person, because of cultural perception of us, you're afraid to continue breastfeeding, because if your baby isn't gaining weight in a particular way, which they use models that are not based on breastfed babies for the growth, that you're neglecting your child or somehow abusing your child. And not everyone has the language that Sachi has to say that, well, my breast milk is doing more for my child than just making him or her gain weight. And I think that's something that's quite powerful for black women to have that, because when I was pregnant and had children after my first son, I made sure I had to wear my wedding ring to appointments. I had to kind of drop in there that I had an education, so that they couldn't fool me into making it seem like, well, if he's not gained a particular weight in this amount of time, then I have to give him a bottle. Otherwise, it's neglect or abuse. And I think sometimes there is that fear of, that you're neglecting your child somehow or something, because you're not doing what they want you to do. Even when it comes to birth, we know that, a lot of us get told, well, if you don't do this way, then, you're at fear of death, basically. You're going to die, have another C-section, and things like that. So I think, fear is a massive part of that breastfeeding journey. If the woman's afraid that her child isn't thriving off of her milk, that she has to answer to these people, and they have the power to impact, whether their social services are going to be called on her, particularly if there may have been a concern with a child in the past, and things have been okay. So there's all of those other things to consider, I think, as well, when, a woman's trying to breastfeed, and we don't really talk about how fear might affect some mothers, and just
I would like to add, thank you for that, because I have, when I introduce myself, I have not explained much more about myself. I'm a lactation consultant, but I also work the lactation consultant bits. I do it voluntarily for the last nearly going to be 7 years now, and I work with now, because I live in Manchester, so I cover from Manchester.
Oh, thank you.
And yes, I mean, I think working in, I work as a peer support. My role is infant feeding support worker. So I hear what you're saying, but I think as well, I mean, yes, I do understand, because I find it sometimes the perception, not perception, it's the assumption that was given when people are boxed into who they are, what they should do. I myself, because I have so many barriers that, I mean, now Islamophobia is rife. So I can understand, but I'm from a different background, in ethnic background. But the things that is discussed resonate to others. For me, is that resonate to others. And yes, I do understand the fearness of mothers when they have faltering growth. So I support the women in the community. Manchester is great. We are out one of the 3 people are from ethnic minorities, Black Asian minority ethnic. And where I'm from, where I am, where I live, nearly 200 languages spoken, very diverse. So I understand, I empathize with what you're saying. I think for me it's the, yes, I do understand. I mean, for me it's, resonate to me as well, not just not for
Black
particular,
women.
yes.
Yeah, and I think it should resonate with anyone who's actually, I really believe it should resonate with anyone who's passionate about breastfeeding, because it shouldn't matter about the colour of who you are to support breastfeeding. If you want to support breastfeeding and you want to care for people, you should see people as one, and it shouldn't be divided. But what's happened is some people don't realise that that's just how they are because of their upbringing, and if that's how things have been and how they visualise things with their upbringing, it's sometimes hard to step out unless they've pinpointed that actually I've noticed that I may treat this person a little bit different than I treat that person, and why is it? Sometimes it could be that they actually got fair, they don't know how to approach them because of they feel that they may not understand them very well, and they don't want to come across in a wrong way. So sometimes that's another thing, is cultural barriers. There's a lot of cultural barriers within breastfeeding that is preventing, and also as sometimes as a black woman, you may see a white woman there and you feel like, oh, if they ask them, or they're gonna feel that I'm as dumb as they make me seem to be out there, as much as I might be highly educated, but I don't want to seem like I'm in need. And actually, you can ask. It's so important, because I'm telling you, with breastfeeding, it's not easy for anyone. It's like you would really have to have someone there to support you. And if you get off breastfeeding and you go well with no pain whatsoever and everything's been perfect, no engorgement, then you've been blessed, because it can get difficult. It really can. And it's knowing what when you've come to a hard point of breastfeeding. And if you don't know how to recognise it, then you're gonna continue. And it only gets worse, and it ends up being a vicious cycle.
You stop.
And you stop, you stop, because seriously, I'm not saying that women should stop breastfeeding. I want all women, if you can, to exclusively breastfeeding. But if you're gonna have bleeding nipples, I understand why you said I need a bottle. Because if you never had no support to tell you, actually that ain't right and this is what you can do to correct it, who wants to continuously having something that's going to cut into their skin? And that's the dynamics you can have within breastfeeding, and that's how it can be. And today is not about making people feel guilty either, because that's another thing. A lot of mums already actually feel guilty with not breastfeeding to their goals, the goals that they put for themselves. And when you're feeling like that, and then we're all like, oh yeah, breastfeeding, oh you never breastfed, why? And then they feel like when you mention breastfeeding, it's like you're the enemy. And I've seen that with some of my friends, because they know I'm into breastfeeding and stuff. And then if I say, oh, did you breastfeed? Like, oh, they like want to run away from me. And I'm like, I'm not going to say nothing harsh. Like, it's your choice. But, you know, like, obviously I'm all for it, but they've got their own experiences that they've been through, and they've not even felt confident to even be able sometimes to even just to speak about it, because they're still dealing with it themselves to overcome what they've actually, how they fed their babies. So it's not about guilt, and like, we have to be careful when we use the word breast is best, because of it makes other mothers feel that they didn't want the best for their babies. And it's not that they didn't want, it's just that they wasn't given the chance to explore it and to understand it, and the support that was needed, that was missing. Yeah. So yeah, anyone else have any questions for Sachi?
It's not really a question actually.
Oh, just to say.
The word oli, could you just pronounce it for me? I keep saying it.
Oligosaccharides.
Oligosaccharides. Do you know much more about that? Like, if you could speak about, it's a very scientifically sounding term. I don't know.
It's a type of sugar, but we don't have the enzyme to break it down. I don't know specifically the type of sugar. I should know that, but I don't. We just don't have the enzyme to break it down. So yeah.
So it's there specifically to be
specific
to feed the bacteria.
Yeah, and they don't add it to formula, so yeah, there's no other food for that bacteria. So if you're formula feeding that bifidobacteria is not flourishing, and it's going to be lost. And then there's the risk of also pathogens coming in, because that's why the way bacteria works, you've got a balance of good and bad bacteria, but the good always has to be a bit more than the negative or pathogenic ones. If not, you are at risk of illness. So yeah.
Okay, so okay, cool. Sorry, go on.
I just wanted to ask if you have any views about the inclusion of oligosaccharides in formula, because you have a number of them now. They have about 2 that you put inside. I mean, of course, for breastfeeding moms, you have hundreds of them in breast milk, but you now have 2 in formula, and that's of course being used to sell formula as closer to breast milk. So do you have any opinions or views on that?
My opinion is that your breast milk changes every single day in the base of what your baby needs. And if you're using that formula that takes your baby from this week to this week, maybe your baby needed that type of oligosaccharide in the beginning and it doesn't need it, but it's not adaptive. Formula is not adaptive. Formula is giving the same thing until you change the formula that you're using. Your breast milk is adaptive, and so your baby will always get what it needs when it needs.
Yeah. Anyone else would like to ask anything?
Thank you for listening.
Okay, so we're just going to wrap up for lunch, but before you go, I've got a little thing I want you all to do. I want you to realise how many times you actually put something to your mouth, and then it's going to give you a little idea of why your baby likes to feed the regular. Yes? So, and then all you on Facebook Live, I want you to do the same thing, and I will log back in. We'll be back about 1:35, so be 45 minutes break. Yeah? Alright, see you then. You can stand up and let us know.
56.
56, wow. You see? Who else?
57.
Yeah. Who else has got a number?
I'm going for like 100 with this.
You feel like 100?
Yeah.
And who else? So maybe, let's say, alright, you started to have something, then you stopped. And then you started again with something else. So in that, let's count that many. Like, if you had different things. How many? Who does know? Everyone lost count, isn't it? Everyone lost count.
I had about 10 peanuts, and that would be like 10.
Okay. Yeah.
And then that's okay. And then now I'm having more peanuts.
Okay, so let's just say that's not even. But if we rounded it up, say for instance we didn't count the peanuts individually, we rounded it up. It was less than an hour. and you've had something towards your mouth 3 times, right? I would separate it with that. Does that work out all right for you?
No, because
Around-
it went over the hour. So
It
I
will.
wouldn't even, it's not like one helping.
Yeah, so you can see why your babies like to be at your breast often.
Yeah.
They like to be at the breast often because it's comforting, and we also eat regular and put something to our mouth and want to taste things, even if it's just water, regular. And this is just like our baby, so we try not to restrict how much our baby eats or when they eat, and we do encourage babies to feed on demand. It's very important to keep up your milk supply.